Okay, it's time for a Week 14 recap. We're going to go ahead and get into the Iron Bowl matchup. Auburn takes on Alabama in Jordan Hare for the Kurtz game. We thought that this game was going to be interesting, and it turned out in the fourth quarter to be a really interesting game, but it still took almost 4 quarters for it to start getting interesting.
I was just so surprised that Auburn was able to get back into it after going down 17 to nothing with their offensive struggles and stuff, but they found a way to do that. But then, of course, just another bonehead screw up at the end of the game for Auburn to lose another close one.
Yeah, unfortunately for Auburn, they just couldn't string together enough miracles in this one to come right within a final shot of tying the game. They had that fumble on the last drive, which really sucked for Auburn. But I figured this was going to be close. You called the outright upset, and it absolutely could have happened. Alabama didn't have their best stuff in this game. I don't feel like. I mean, they ran the ball okay, but passing the ball, they didn't. They didn't really move it too well against Auburn. I've been saying that if Auburn could string together a good offensive performance with a good defensive performance, that Bama would be in a lot of trouble. I don't think there's many teams that would do well against Auburn if they have their best outing on offense and defense because their ceiling's high on both ends. They just hadn't put it together yet. And this game was close. They didn't really put it together for 4 quarters, but in the fourth quarter, the offense really turned up. I felt like Ashton Daniels played some of his best ball in that fourth quarter. Unfortunately, it was too little too late. Isaiah Horton came up with 3 red zone touchdowns in this game for Alabama, which ended up making him probably the impact player of this game. Without Isaiah Horton, they don't have any of their touchdowns. So I think that you've got to look back at that last catch, the 6 yard game winning touchdown to seal it for Alabama late, right before they get the fumble, which I guess you could say that sealed the game. But Isaiah Horton was the impact player in this game easily. Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, little to no impact in this game, which was shocking. They've made an impact in every game so far for them.
Yeah, to talk more about Bama, I mean, these offensive struggles have really gone back since the LSU game. They just look kind of off, in my opinion. And my big question is, how's that going to, or how are they going to look against Georgia in the SEC championship now? I mean, they've historically been really good against Georgia, but is their offense going to be able to come back strong enough for them to win that game?
They got to be able to run the ball. That's what it comes down to. And I think that they've tried some new things. They're moving some guys around. They had a better performance against Auburn running the ball. I think they had a guy get around that 90-yard mark. Still no 100-yard rushers, really. I think their only 100-yard rusher this season was against Vanderbilt, possibly, with Jan Miller breaking off a garbage time touchdown. I've never seen an Alabama team struggle this much to run the ball. I don't know what the problem is because I feel like the offensive line talent's there and they've got some pedigree at the running back position. I don't know why they're struggling to run the ball. I don't know if it's a schematical thing because Caleb DeBoer offenses have been able to run the ball. I mean, if you go back to their playoff run, they had that state running back transfer. What was his name? You would know.
Dylan Johnson.
Noah Johnson played really, really well for them. I mean, even the quarterback run was an element for them, but up to this point, I mean, the only big runs I'm seeing is from Ty Simpson, which is crazy to even say. Every now and then he scrambles and gets a decent chunk of yards, but he shouldn't be running the ball in the first place. Like he's a pocket passer. So I think that's really strange. We need to see them run the ball if they're going to want to have a really good chance to beat Georgia in this rematch. But Ashton Daniels really was the story of the game for Auburn. I mean, he ended up accounting for a large majority of the yards in this game. They outgained Alabama, and that was not really even my key
This is
stat.
410 to 280.
Yeah, I mean that's the second time Alabama's done something like this season. This one stands out the most to me. What's funny is they had the same situation happen to them against Oklahoma where they lost, but they absolutely outplayed Oklahoma pretty much in every area of the field except for the turnover margin. And that's what happened here. Auburn had 2 turnovers in this game. Bama had none. Auburn actually went 2 for 2 in the red zone, but Bama doubled them up in red zone possessions, going 4 for 4. That kind of sums up to me this game coming down to a one possession. Auburn having all those other statistical categories in their favor. Um, Honestly, if you just showed me those things, I would have said they won. But then you take turnovers and red zone trips into account, and Auburn's just a little lacking there. So I think that's what it came down to. This was a good matchup. I think Auburn is much improved late this season. With the hire of Alex Golish, maybe that offense takes a turn next year. Ashton Daniels is looking to return. Deuce Knight up in the air on if he's coming back, but I would think he probably returns as well. So they've got some bright future if they can hold on to their star players on offense. I really like what Alex Golesh is able to do with quarterbacks. You see what he's done with Byron Brown these past 2 seasons. Byron Brown put up one of the best statistical seasons a group of five quarterback has put up probably ever this year. Over 1,000 yards rushing, 14 rushing touchdowns, over 3,000 passing yards, I think around 28 touchdown passes. So they got a guy like Deuce Knight and Ashton Daniels just waiting in the bullpen for Alex Golesh next season. I think that at least one of those guys will be putting up some really good stats for that team next year. They're going to be dangerous. Moving on to the Egg Bowl, we went to this game. It was a lot of fun, at least for me. Ole Miss wins with a final of 38-19 in Starkville to improve to 11-1. Trinidad Chambliss finished out the season with a really strong performance, going for 385 and four total touchdowns. But he wasn't the only quarterback that had a statistical masterclass. We saw Kamario Taylor start this game, which is not what I expected, and he ran all over Ole Miss in this one.
Yeah, I mean, he had some great plays. He was really the only reason that this game was remotely close. I feel like if Shapen's back there, I don't even know if we like get the 10 points with the
Yeah,
way it was looking. I mean, the runs Kamario had were just so huge for us moving the ball and scoring, and having Shapen in there, you wouldn't have had any of that.
Yeah, I think that it would flip how y'all play. I mean, y'all are a different team when Kamario Taylor's in there. Y'all can run the ball. It opens up for some play action because, I mean, you have to keep the defense so honest. Like, Kamario Taylor is a very talented runner. Like, he's super athletic. If you're not committing several guys to the box and a spy, he could get a first down on any play running the ball, which you can't say that about many guys. So I think Ole Miss had to commit a certain amount of guys to stopping the run early, and then when it was obvious that State needed to get big passing plays, they backed off and let him have yards. That was just part of the schematics of it. So I think the stats may have been a little inflated, but I mean he earned a solid 120 of those early in the game. And I mean, I don't think Ole Miss was prepared to stop that. We saw what happened with Taylor Green earlier this season. They couldn't contain him. I mean, it was pretty similar, but Kamario Taylor did what he wanted to do on the ground this game. He had an insane touchdown run. And on that one where he like completely sauced that guy in the open field.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. So State's got a bright future. Now, I think that this game obviously is not the result that State fans wanted to see, but at the end of the day, you got to be feeling pretty good about next season if you're a State fan. Braylon Womack just flipped from Auburn to Mississippi State over the week. That's a huge commitment. That's the first five-star State's pulled in a long time.
First one since Charles Cross in 19.
Yeah, that's a big deal for Jeff Levy and that coaching staff. We've been talking about that recently. I don't know if we ever mentioned it on the podcast, but I mean, I think you were feeling like that was the State lean for a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, that was his second visit last week. There's definitely been some interest.
Yeah, and I mean, I had been to Starkville ever until this season, and I think I ended up going to three state games. I'm an Ole Miss fan. And I can say confidently that Starkville has become a more intriguing destination for recruits. The game day atmosphere is electric when states showing up to play, and I think that this team was competitive most of the year. So you got that atmosphere almost every home game, at least for the first quarter, unless you were playing Georgia. So I think that this team is trending up. Next season could be a lot more fun for Mississippi State. So, a lot to look forward to there. I think that the key play in this game for me was the interception that hit the state player in the helmet. Princely Emmanuel ends up getting a really, I say Princely, rest in peace. Prince Well Emmanuel was the player that came up with this interception. It was completely insane. I think we both just kind of looked at each other after that interception and realized, yep, that's going to come back to bite Mississippi State. I mean, that was just a play like you couldn't have drawn it up worse. Like it really should have just been an incomplete pass at the end of the day. It's a check down, just a little too high, hits an unsuspecting running back in the helmet, pops up in the air, and a defensive end comes up with a crazy snag to pull it down. Um, those plays rarely ever happen, and when they don't go your way, it's just like we worked so hard to move the ball down the field for that to happen. It's very deflating. I think that kind of just put the nail on the coffin early. Is like, okay, State's gonna have to do a lot to win this game.
Kind of just encapsulates the season to
Yeah, you could take that as a
random
play for
little,
the season.
random little dumb mistakes that just bite you like that.
Yeah, like the Missouri game, there were some plays that just you really couldn't even come up with an excuse
There was
for how
multiple
bad they were.
plays in that game that were just completely head scratching.
Yeah, and I think that'll change. This team had some stuff not go their way this year. They had some close games. I think next year y'all could turn the tide on some of that stuff. So I mean, that play definitely sunk y'all's chances. Ole Miss getting 29 first downs and going for over 545 total yards didn't really help very
And
much.
picking on our one specific DB the whole game. Like I don't know how many yards that dude gave up. It was bad.
Yeah, our entire wide receiver core decided to have a day in this game. Deuce Alexander had an 88-yard touchdown to kind of put this one way out of reach. Deshaun Stribling had two really nice one-on-one touchdowns in the end zone. Um, he played really well. Caden Lee had a really nice game. Winston Watkins had a couple catches. Um, I mean, we had a bunch of guys play some really good football in this game at wide receiver. So I think that's the biggest strength of this football team is the depth at the wide receiver position. In the playoffs, this is going to matter a ton. So when you start playing teams like, let's say Ole Miss does play in Ohio State, or they play in Indiana or Georgia again, they're going to face some really good defensive backs and some really good defensive lines. You have to be able to pick on DBs. You got to find a matchup that you like, and Ole Miss can expose just about any kind of matchup they want. They just move a guy around somewhere, sub somebody out when they're not expecting, really quick with some tempo, and you've got a different matchup that you weren't expecting to have on DB that may be giving up a lot of yards or having a lot of PIs. So I think that favors Ole Miss in a lot of games. That's the huge strength that Ole Miss has. And then Kawan Lacey has been playing some great football. He had another good game against State here. At the end of the day, this year Ole Miss had the better football team, and that's what mattered. Next year, I think we're going to be in for a really interesting egg bowl. So hopefully we'll stay consistent with this podcast, and we'll be back here this time next year talking about a completely different game. I think that State's currently shaping up to have a slightly better trajectory than Ole Miss going into next year.
Maybe
So
so.
a
I
lot
don't
can
say.
change in a year with now where college football is. We may be looking at a completely different scene next year. Texas has proven us right, taking down Texas A&M 27 to 17. We were on this one again. So this is another good upset to look back on as we kind of preview the 2025 season and games that we may have gotten a little bit of head start on as opposed to the media and the general public. I think we felt like Texas was probably going to take this one outright, and they were able to do that. I didn't see them winning the way that they did. I figured that Marcel Reed was probably going to have a pretty tough game for them to lose this. He didn't play well. Thought he was going to exit the game with an ankle injury early. Comes back in, doesn't throw any touchdowns, throws two picks. Not his best outing. Probably one of his worst outings of the season. It maybe other than Auburn. That one was tough. Trey Wisner goes for 174 total yards, and Texas as a team rushes for 218. I haven't seen Texas run the ball like this all season against a conference team. So this, I mean, if Texas were to make the playoffs, this would give me a different feel for the team. Unfortunately, I think this team's pretty much out of the mix for the playoff with the new rankings that we just looked at. But when they can run the ball, they're a different football team.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with how they ran the ball. I mean, that's been something that I haven't been able to do all year. But it also raises questions about A&M's run defense, which has been suspect in multiple games this year.
Yeah, we've talked about this several times. I noticed it first early in the season against UTSA and Utah State. This team was giving up big yards on the ground. But as they got into conference play, they started to win, and I think that kind of got swept under the rug. But you look at the game against Arkansas, Mike Washington and Taylor Green had career games. They played really well. A&M gave up some decent rushing yards to Missouri. Even though they won that game in a blowout, they still gave up yards on the ground. There's been a lot of constant trends with this football team giving up yards on the ground. South Carolina, I don't think they really moved it much on the ground. They actually threw it all over A&M early in the first half of that game. But they had several games this season where rushing defense was definitely not a strength. I think that if a rematch were to happen with them playing against Notre Dame again, that's the biggest matchup I'm looking for is how well Notre Dame is going to be able to run the ball against A&M in a rematch. They've got Jadarian Price and Jeremiah Love playing some of the best football in the country with that dual running back system. That's hard to stop. A&M hasn't really stopped many people this season running the ball. It's just only come back to bite them in the Texas game.
Yeah, more about if that game were to happen. How would that look with the improvement Notre Dame's defense has had throughout the year? Because at that point in the season, their defense was playing very poorly, but they've improved a lot. So
The secondary's tightened up for this team. I think it matters a lot. I think this line would be very close, even though it would be in College Station theoretically with how the playoff selection committee has it. I think that Notre Dame might be close to being a favorite in that one. I might lean Notre Dame in that. in a big game when it matters the most, I don't know that I'm taking A&M. Notre Dame's been there before. They were
Notre
there
Dame was
last
there,
year.
yeah, last
They
year.
were at the national championship last year. It's hard to even believe that team made it that far. But I just don't like A&M in the spot that they're in right now. They're not peaking at all. I mean, if anything, they peaked early in the season. They're starting to fall down at the wrong time. So they may not have gone 8-4 again this year, but they're starting to kind of show the similarities of recent A&M teams where when it really matters, they kind of start to crumble. So that weak SEC conference slate that they had is starting to show a little bit, which is crazy to even say as far as them being an SEC team. I don't feel like they had a really tough schedule. But I mean, the 35-yard touchdown run from Arch Manning to ice this game was, I think, probably the play that stood out to me the most. Arch didn't play a crazy good game here. He actually started off really slow. I didn't think he made many throws early in this game, but when it really mattered, he came up with some big plays and he put his head down and he was able to find a big run here with a team that put together a pretty solid rushing output for this one. That's what won it for this team. At the end of the day, running the ball won the game for Texas. If they hadn't been able to run the ball, I think A&M would have found a way to win this. But they were able to exploit a weakness on this A&M team and brought it home. 10-point win in Austin. At least gave them a chance to be recognized for the playoff. Finished the season on a good note. I had Texas going 9-3, so definitely a good hit for me. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit with some of our hits and misses from the preseason now that we've finished the regular season. But that was one of mine. I don't know exactly which games I had picked for that one. It'll be interesting to look back on. But big win for Texas. A&M's going to have to tighten up for the playoffs.
A&M remains little brother to Texas still.
Yeah, Texas owns them, like we said. So we'll see if that holds true for next year. The big game, Michigan in the big house takes on Ohio State. Loses this one 27-9. Unfortunately, I was coerced by none other than Landon to pick the Wolverines in this one. I I had good reason, and the reason solely was the 4-game win streak. Rest in peace. Michigan had really nothing else in my mind to lure me into picking this game other than they just had been doing it up to this point. Running back injury questions. Justice Haynes was out. Gordon Marshall ends up leaving the game in the first quarter after their only big play of the game, coming off of a decent run from him. Michigan started off the game with an interception in the big run. I was like, okay, this looks good. It's happening again. And then after that, nothing. Crickets for the rest of the game.
Them being held to a field goal after that was huge for Ohio State.
6-0 was not going to get it done early in this game. Halfway through the first quarter, if they had kept going at the same pace they were going at, it still would have been a really close football game. But they went off a cliff production wise after those first two drives. They did not do anything. Bryce Underwood was a non factor, did nothing in the passing game, was not a contributor in the run game. I think Michigan came out with a grand total of 163 yards in this game. They had it exactly where they wanted it. A snow game in Ann Arbor, and you start off with an interception and you score on your first two drives. I don't know if you can draw it up better than that for Michigan. It was shaping up to be a slugfest, and then Julian Sayin just said, "Oh wait, I'm the most accurate quarterback in college football, and I have the best receivers in the sport. I'm going to throw for 3 touchdowns and 233 yards, and we're going to win the football game outright." And they just never looked back. The 35-yard touchdown on that wheel route to Jeremiah Smith was an absolute seed. They tried to call this one back for what possibly could have been a touchback. I think that some people were really arguing that this was a touchback. It looked like he kind of lost possession slash changed hands as he crossed over the pylon and out of bounds. I just don't know in what world that should be punished with giving the ball to Michigan and taking a touchdown away from Ohio State. I think the officials made the right call, even if the rule possibly favored that being a touchback. I think the rule needs to be changed if that's the case, because that would have been an awful call. I don't think Ohio State loses the game if that changes, but it definitely impacts the final score and how the game felt. So I don't like that that was called into question. Maybe the touchback ruling needs to be changed up a little bit. That's probably another conversation for another day. But big touchdown there for Jeremiah Smith, making what was probably one of his biggest plays of the season in a huge game with a lot of smack talk leading up to this. I think that probably felt really good.
This outcome really didn't surprise me too much. I know I picked Michigan to win, but If Ohio State was going to win, I figured it would be this way. I mean, they were the better team coming into this game pretty clearly, and they just showed up and played exactly like that.
I don't think either of us really thought Michigan was the better team here. It was kind of like the Texas game where there's a trend, and to steer away from the trend kind of feels, I don't know, a little bit iffy. And this was just one of those games. Michigan, up to this point, had been doing the same thing. They'd been showing up with subpar teams, putting on subpar, inconsistent performances, only to end up beating a highly favorited, highly more talented Ohio State team in a huge rivalry. So we gave the rivalry its credit, we gave Michigan its credit, and they did not deliver. So Ohio State has a huge win to finish the season and relegate Michigan to mediocrity once again. Ohio State, the undefeated number one team in the country, staying at number one since week one. So I haven't had a team do that in a while.
Or no, what it was Texas, I think, and then they
Yeah,
beat
since they
Texas
beat
and took it.
Texas in week
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
So I guess technically you could say week two. Um, but Ohio
They were
State,
3, and Penn State was 2.
don't even.
Uh,
Let's not even go there. Well, I guess we'll technically have to go there in a minute when we talk about some of our bad beats.
AP garbage.
But we were coerced by the AP poll into picking Penn State to be 10-2 or 11-1. That was not our fault. We will get to that later, but that'll wrap up Michigan Ohio State recap. My favorite game on the slate ended up going really interesting. Vanderbilt taking on Tennessee in Knoxville, winning this game 45-24 in a intense rivalry game. Once again, the man is the point of the conversation. Diego Pavia resurging into the Heisman odds and is most likely finding himself taking a trip to New York. Unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be taking a trip to the playoffs, which sucks. I think this team deserves a spot. There's just not enough of them, which may call for an expansion, but I think that that's probably something that the execs are already looking at. I don't think it has to do with this team necessarily for that being a reason, but if I was on the board and I looked at this Vanderbilt team, I think they've done enough to deserve being in. It's just a very crowded field. But Diego Pavia has a great game, going for 433 total yards and two touchdowns, having the big 24-yard touchdown run to ice the game. They absolutely dominated Tennessee in the second half. It was a tight game early, 21-21 at half. They rip off another three touchdowns in the second half to take a big lead on Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, Vandy was flat out the much better team here. It was tied at halftime, but that was mostly due to the 2 interceptions from Pavia. I mean, this one ended up being 45-24. Tennessee did not turn the ball over once, and Vandy with the 2 interceptions still able to win this one by 24. Vandy with 582 total yards, and then holding Tennessee to 83 rushing yards for the
Yeah,
game.
I think that stuck out to me a lot. Was 314 to 83 rushing yard advantage in favor of Vanderbilt. This football team's been doing this to people all season, but to exploit Tennessee in their home stadium, with their defensive weaknesses that they've shown all season as badly as they did in a rivalry game, this was one of the worst beatdowns I think Tennessee's ever taken from Vanderbilt. I mean, that's what it was. They got out physicaled by Vanderbilt at their stadium. That's not a good feeling. I'm shocked that there is not a lot more, I guess, unsettling in Knoxville around this game. Getting dominated by Vanderbilt in a rivalry matchup can't feel good. And I know that Josh Heupel was able to pull off an 8-4 season, which was about the expectation. I mean, most people were like, yeah, 8-7 wins is probably about right for this team. And that's where they ended up. They didn't beat Georgia, they didn't beat Bama, they didn't beat Vanderbilt, and they dropped the game to OU. I mean, outside of the Vanderbilt game, I think they were supposed to lose all those other ones preseason. So they really didn't exceed or fall below expectations, but I know the Vanderbilt game left a sour taste in this team's mouth heading into next season. This game in Nashville, with what's shaping up to be another good Vanderbilt football team, with the commitment of Jared Curtis today, the number one overall recruit in the country, I think this will be a really good game this time next year. Depending on who Tennessee brings in at quarterback, and if Joey Aguilar maybe comes back, that should be a fun rematch.
Definitely be interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know Clark Lee's gotten an extension with Vanderbilt. This team, I don't think is going anywhere. I think next year we're going to be talking about a new kind of Vanderbilt, a new brand. So it'll be really neat to watch how this team improves from year to year and see what they can do. But right now, I think all eyes are on Diego Pavia in the Heisman. I think that he should have a legitimate chance. If I was voting, I would probably vote for Diego Pavia. I don't think Fernando Mendoza deserves the Heisman. I think next up you'd probably have to give it to Julian Sayin, and his stats don't pop off the paper to me. His opponents don't pop off the paper to me. If anything, the Michigan game upped his odds in my eyes. I think the Michigan game was his best game, and he started off with an interception, and they didn't do much in the first quarter, only to rip off 3 touchdowns in the next 3 quarters. I thought that was his best game by far. I mean, you could point to the rest of the season and his numbers is very impressive, but you stack up all these quarterbacks' resumes next to each other and you take their logos and their names out of the equation, Diego Pavia is the Heisman winner. It's really not close. You could take Fernando Mendoza's touchdowns overall and maybe compare it to Diego Pavia and say, well, that's a key stat. Sure. You can also look at Julian Sayin's completion percentage and his touchdown interception ratio and say, well, he's got this on his hands. That's a pretty good stat. Yeah, you could say that. But then you look at what Diego Pavia was able to do with the football team around him, what he means to his team, and the stats he was able to put up. I think he's clearly the MVP of the season. He may not have had that huge game like beating Alabama and Tuscaloosa, or making the playoffs, or winning the SEC championship. But I think he means more to his team as an individual player than anybody in the country. So I think that's his argument to win the Heisman. We'll see what the voters have to say about it, though. That's what matters at the end of the day. We don't know who they are, but they're going to be picking this award, so we'll just have to watch. Okay, we've got a couple more games we're going to break down really quickly. We have Georgia taking on Georgia Tech with a very gaudy final score of 16-9. I didn't see this one coming, especially with the performance of Georgia on offense. I figured if Georgia Tech played this way on offense, it would be a massive blowout. Gunnar Stockton only drops like 70 passing yards in this one.
I was so shocked. I mean, Georgia Tech's defense has been really trash for like the past month, so I expected Georgia to really feast on that. But I mean, they didn't. 3 field goals and a touchdown. Just really weird slog of a game. Very surprised. I thought it was going to be a shootout, if anything.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I felt like Georgia was going to win handily. They didn't, but if they did in the way that I thought, I figured they'd give up some points in the process. Like their defense has been spotty all year, so I figured even Georgia's defense would struggle in this one. But both defenses ended up being the best units on the field in this game. The offenses did not show up. Gunnar Stockton had his worst game of the year. Haynes King did not have a great game. It was just a hard-headed rivalry matchup. Georgia Tech comes out is the loser here, unfortunately, finishing their season with several losses to end their slate, missing out on the playoffs. I had this team sneaking into the ACC championship, winning it, and making the playoffs. They fall short of that, unfortunately, but they had a good season. I think you got to be happy if you're Brent Key, despite the fact how they finished. That's got to be frustrating, but they were able to be in the national spotlight for a while.
Yeah, just the Pittsburgh game. That's got them. I mean, just inexcusable performance
Yeah,
in that one,
the NC State
especially with
game
how Pitt
too.
performed against Notre Dame and Miami.
I think that fits Georgia Tech where they're supposed to be in the tier that we expected them to probably be in, which is in that tier 3 to tier 2 range. They're not a competitor at the end of the day with playoff teams. So I think if they had gotten in the playoffs, they probably would have gotten shelled.
I'd have to agree.
But yeah, low offensive output. Georgia comes out on top, takes on Alabama in the SEC championship game. Should be a fun one. Next game we have on the slate was Arizona State taking on Arizona. We both, I think, were on Arizona in this one, right? I know I had
Yes,
Arizona winning
I
this
had
one.
Arizona as well.
They dominated Jeff Sims in a kind of defensive struggle early in this one. Jeff Sims drops 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. I think he ripped off a touchdown run,
It
which
was
was their only score of the game.
11 for 25 for 114.
That is a classic Jeff Sims
Did
performance.
have a touchdown run.
So
7 yards.
that doesn't surprise me very much. Noah Fafita played a clean slate game, very solid performance. Arizona, sneaky 9-3 team, and I think they moved up into the top 18 of the
They
college football
were, yeah, I
playoff.
believe they were number 18.
Yeah, I like the way this team played this season. They had the close loss against BYU, but the outlier loss against Iowa State, that was a gross game. I actually bet on Arizona and had them as my dog in that game. They did not deliver. They could have been a fringe playoff team if they had been 10-2, depending on if they beat BYU. So
Yeah, I mean, they were beating them by 10 with like 5 minutes left in that game.
crazy how that shakes out that Arizona even would have had a chance to be in this conversation, but they were an overtime win at BYU from being in that conversation. So Really interesting game here. If you had told me at the beginning of the season that Arizona would dominate Arizona State in the rivalry at the end of the season, I probably would have been pretty shocked. But knowing that Sam Levitt was not playing in this game, that Arizona was on a uprising, that would have made sense. But we were not expecting that to be the case. But here we are, both teams finishing out the season with 3+ losses. Neither will be competing for the Big 12. And then we've got Oklahoma versus LSU in what probably was the lowest scoring game on the entire slate up until OU decided to throw a wide open touchdown to close this one out to Isaiah Centegna. Uh, I have no words for how horrible OU played in this game. For them to come out with a win here at home against a absolutely dead in the water LSU team, they're lucky to still be in the playoff, to be honest with you. I'm shocked the playoff committee didn't bump them down after that. I didn't bump them down, to be fair. So I'm not judging the playoff committee for leaving them where they're at, but this was a bad performance. So I guess if this is their bad performance and they won, they shouldn't get pushed down.
It's really weird looking at a stat sheet here because, like, yardage wise, they actually didn't have a terrible game offensively. They had 393 yards, which against an LSU defense isn't bad, but the three interceptions from Mateer and only running the ball for 75 yards hurts for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of that came in the fourth quarter. They had a tunnel screen to Dion Burks, which was like 50 yards. And then they had like the 55-yarder to Isaiah Centegna late in the fourth to take the lead. And it looked like Oklahoma was going to be battling just to get a field goal. But they had a coverage bust on the Centegna touchdown late, take the lead. And then they had the tunnel screen just break wide open.
That's how they've scored this year, though, mostly on these huge plays. They
Yeah.
get a couple of them every game, it seems like.
Yeah, Centegno's been the entire offensive production at wide receiver. Dion Burks had been very quiet until this game with the tunnel screen touchdown, and that was all his speed. Good blocking setup, and he accelerates right through the gap and takes a touchdown there. LSU did virtually nothing on offense in this game, thriving off of three John Mateer interceptions. I mean, it was just LSU's defense keeping them alive here.
Yeah, I mean, they had sub 200 yards.
That's the story of their football season. If they had an offense, who knows what this team could do, which is crazy to say after just 2 years ago, they had one of the best offenses that has ever stepped foot on the field for LSU, and they went 9-3 because they had no defense. And now you get Brian Kelly building an elite defense and no offense. He gets fired. They hire Lane Kiffin. I don't know what they're expecting to get out of this. And maybe they recruit at a higher level, but they've already been doing that. Maybe their offense is better. They've had great offenses. I don't know what they're expecting, to be honest with you, to be different. I feel like Brian Kelly probably was underachieving there, but at the same time, he was able to recruit, despite the fact that he's not from Louisiana, he doesn't have roots there. He was looking to win at a school that he felt like he had a better chance to win a national championship at. He thought that he could upgrade going from Notre Dame to LSU, and that is not the case. Notre Dame has been a better football team since he left.
Yeah, I mean, they've improved, in my opinion, under Marcus Freeman a good bit.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely make the case that Notre Dame is a better program because he left. And I don't even know that necessarily has to do as much with Brian Kelly not being a great coach as much as it has to do with Marcus Freeman being a better coach and a better fit. And LSU has not been a better football team since Brian Kelly went there. You could say the same. Ole Miss is in the same situation as Notre Dame, except they hired from within as well. So I think that if you're Keith Carter, you looked at the Notre Dame situation and said, okay, well, I've got proven commodities around me. I want to retain players. Let's hire Pete Golding, and we can recover from this.
Just better hope it doesn't end up like Zach Arnett at State.
Yeah, we're gonna have to hope that's not the case. I'm leaning more on the side of Ole Miss is gonna have a rebuild year. Our schedule's tough. I think that player retention is gonna be tough. We're losing recruits by the day as we approach National Signing Day. I think it's going to be a tough one for Ole Miss. If we can't pull in a transfer portal class, we're going to get skull drugged by all these big teams on the road. But, I mean, you could do what Notre Dame did and come out with a decent recruiting class, retain some players, and turn things around. But Marcus Freeman's first season wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. They lost to Marshall. So we can't forget that.
What they go like 9-4 or something against a
It wasn't great.
schedule that was pretty easy.
It wasn't great. And then their national championship run where they almost had a chance to compete for a national championship, they lost NIU, you know, and Ohio State ultimately beats them soundly in that game. But they still made it to the Natty. So that's a lot more than LSU's had to show since they hired Brian Kelly. We'll see if that changes under Lane Kiffin. He's a great coach. They have a bright future, I would assume, with him there.